So here I have added an extra simple statement. Call it R, and it's she is an excellent writer. Okay, so in addition to P and Q, where she struggles with arithmetic and she does well with algebra, now we're saying she's an excellent writer. Okay, so now we're going to start combining three things with multiple connectives just to see how the translations work. Again, remember, we're not looking for whether they are true or false. We're not really even looking to see if they even really make sense. Like, you could say she struggles with arithmetic, if she struggles with arithmetic, then she's a good writer or something. That doesn't really connect, but I'm not really looking for that. I really just want to get the translation of the compound statement down, okay? Later on in future sections, we'll deal with the truth or false value of those statements, okay? So right now, let's just look at this one. Again, the parentheses signify that those statements, that connective is grouped kind of together, that it's its own part of the sentence. In this case, the negation sticks with the P. The conjunction applies to just the Q and not P part. The implication or the conditional applies to the whole sentence. This is what we would call the dominant connective. Okay, so in our case, just as a side note here, the dominant connective will be outside of the parentheses. Okay, so the dominant connective is outside parentheses. Okay. So, that being said, I need to start this off with a conditional, right? It's an if-then statement, and then within the first part of the if-then, you have a conjunction, okay? So we're going to have if this thing, then this last thing, okay? So the first thing here, if she does well with with algebra, does well with algebra, and struggles with arithmetic, so if she does well with algebra and struggles with arithmetic, then, there's your conditional, she is an excellent writer. Okay? So that's just a translation. Now, does it make any real sense? Probably not. What does doing well with algebra and struggling with arithmetic have to do with being an excellent writer? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. In this case, all I really want to know is how to translate based upon the symbolic form. Okay? How to get these things worded well in English. All right. Another example you might see is something like not R or Q, and then a biconditional with P. Again, this doesn't actually have to make sense. I just need to be able to translate it accurately. Now, this is an interesting one because I don't have any parentheses. So the question is, which of these connectives is the most dominant? Would I want the not to apply to everything? Would I say it's not the case that R or Q is biconditional with P, if and only if P? Or would I say that maybe I just maybe I want the parentheses around R and Q, or maybe I want the parentheses around Q and P? how could I do that? Or around not R and Q or Q. So there's some ambiguity in this, the way this is written. And so for that reason, what we're going to do is we're going to establish an order of dominance for when parentheses are not given. It's very similar to the order of operations in mathematics. Okay, so when you're doing arithmetic, hopefully you guys are familiar with the order of operations. And the way I like to do the order of operations, just so you can kind of get a feel for how it's similar, is I like to think of them in levels. Okay, the first thing you do is parentheses, and my green marker is dead. Throw that one in the garbage. Oh, it's the only green one I have. Well, let's go with blue. So you start with parentheses, then you move to exponents, then you move to multiplying and dividing, and then you move to adding and subtracting, right? And so you learn this in your arithmetic and algebra classes, that this is the order of operations. You work your way down the levels, and within each level, in the parentheses, you go inside out. With multiplying and dividing, you always go left to right. And with adding and subtracting, you always go left to right. So there's some rules involved here. And there are some times where you might divide before you multiply if it occurs on the left, that sort of thing. But you always do stuff inside parentheses first. It's a similar idea here. We're going to have what we call the order of dominance. Okay, kind of like the order of operations. Order of dominance. And so this is kind of the reverse order in which you would do the operations or do the connective. So the highest order, there's really 4 orders, so we'll put them at 4 is on top, 3, 2, and then 1. Not in terms of what, these are in terms of ranking the order of the dominance, ranking the dominance. So the most dominant are the biconditionals. Okay, so if nothing else, if there's no parentheses, we always assume the biconditional is the most dominant, and so everything else will be in parentheses. Okay. Next, we assume that conditionals are the next most dominant, followed by conjunctions and disjunctions, and following that by negations. Okay. What's interesting here is that with conjunctions and conjunctions and disjunctions, because they kind of fit at the same level, if you had a statement that was like P or Q and R, you wouldn't know which one to do, okay, or which one is dominant, okay. It's weird to say to do, that might be weird, but P or Q or R and R, you wouldn't know if it was these grouped together or these grouped together. And so when that's the case, you have to have the parentheses to know. All right, you don't just pick one or anything like that. So you must have parentheses for it to make sense. Okay. So must have parentheses. Okay, you must have the parentheses if it's only those two. Okay, so this statement actually doesn't make sense. This is what we would call ambiguous. Because there's really 2 different ways that you could interpret it, and it doesn't tell us which of those 2. And those 2 different ways might be very different. It might lead to different results in terms of the truth of that statement. Okay, so let's go back to this one we were working with in red here, not R or Q, if and only if P. So you could really think of this as the biconditional is most dominant. Everything else is in the first part of that biconditional statement. The not being the least dominant will only apply to R. Okay, if these two were switched in dominance, then the not would apply to the whole or statement, which we don't want here. So the not applies to the R. This is equivalent to having parentheses around that portion there. Okay. All right, so I would say if. So it's, oh no, I'm sorry, I don't want if. If is a conditional, I want this to be a biconditional. So I would say in the middle somewhere I'm going to have the phrase if and only if. Before that I'm going to write out this disjunction. I would say not R. So she is not an excellent writer, or she does well with algebra. If and only if P, if and only if she struggles with arithmetic. Okay. All right, so that's how you would write that one out. Again, this first portion, and I might want to put a comma here to sort of separate off the first part of that sentence, the first part of the biconditional, from the second part of the biconditional. Okay. Anyway, she is not an excellent writer or does well with algebra if and only if she struggles with arithmetic. Okay. Again, does that really make sense? Is that really a realistic possibility? Probably not. But it doesn't really matter. Again, what really matters is how do I translate that into English?